Hello, sweet parents. Welcome to the When Our Adult Children Walk Away podcast. My name is Dr. Janet Steinkamp, and during each episode of When Our Adult Children Walk Away, I will provide my professional and personal insights, information and opportunities for your self-reflection and growth, tips and tricks to make every day count, and encouragement to keep moving forward. I'm here to help you dig deep and get down to the root causes so that you can find your way out of the darkness to a positive and lasting relationship. Grab your notebook and a pen, settle into your favorite chair, and let's get to it. Today we are talking about one of the most difficult parts of estrangement, the unrest of not knowing. Recently I asked current clients if there were topics that they would like to hear a podcast episode about, and this was one of the topics that came to my attention. So we're going to talk about the silence that comes with estrangement in a different episode. In this episode, we're talking about the unknown, not knowing, and the fact that we may never know what led to the estrangement, why our adult children decide to come back. There are lots of questions that we just won't get the answers to. So why do our adult children walk away without explanations? Why do we as parents stay stuck in that painful loop of unanswered questions? And how can you find peace when you know you may never know why? It's a big ask, and we're going to work through this. I work with clients to find some kind of solid footing, if you would, even without answers to some of the most basic questions. And so we're going to work through some of what we talk about in coaching. There are 6 segments to this episode. Each segment could be its own topic for a podcast episode. So you may not get as much information as you would like on any one of these 6 topics. However, keep listening to episodes and watch for some of these to come out in individual episodes. And if you have one that is of particular interest, send me an email. You can send it to janet@jesteinkamp.com. I do answer my email. It does take a few days, but if you don't hear from me in those few days, then send me another email because something has gone wrong. Okay, so segment 1, the human need for answers. We as humans are hardwired to get information, to find closure, to find our way to a conclusion. We seek that understanding in an effort to reduce uncertainty and to regain control. Now, some of us may be known or feel like we have a higher need for control. All of us are uncomfortable with the uncertainty. All of us are driven to find answers to the questions. And estrangement, by the nature of what it is, does not meet that need. It leaves all kinds of questions unanswered. There's no clear story. We can guess at the reasons things happen, or people say things or don't say things, or show up or don't show up. We can guess, and we can make some educated guesses. What I have found is that in the research studying our adult children, where we ask all kinds of survey questions about why did you leave, how did you attempt to make your needs known, did you attempt to set boundaries, all of those things. It's surprising what the answers are. We think we know. So let's keep going through this episode and see if you can hear some things that surprise you. This unknown, this time of unrest, parents often call this time of unrest. They describe it as like mental looping, where they get caught in the cycle of why, how come, when, who said, how can I fix this, if only I could explain. And those questions, that unrest, really needs to be worked through and set aside. Or, we feel like we're going to lose our mind. Sometimes it feels like you can't take another breath. But we do have to keep going. We have to keep going for them, and we have to keep going for the rest of our family, our co-workers, ourselves. This is important. This is important to figure out what to do with the unknown and this uneasiness of not knowing. That absence of an explanation creates emotional turbulence, guilt, confusion, And we can become pretty obsessive on why. The other thing about this time is that it leaves our grief unanswered, undealt with. It's very difficult to grieve the loss of what we knew, what was usual, our relationship with our adult son or daughter, even if it's transitioning and we're not in full no contact. There's still grief. There's grief at the change in our role, how they talk to us or don't talk to us. There's a lot of grief, but most often the peace comes from accepting the uncertainty, not solving it. Okay, segment 2. Why adult children often don't offer explanations. Why don't they tell us? Why do they just act like nothing happened? I worked with a family who's, I don't remember if it's a son or daughter, but they showed up at the door, knocked on the door, parents open the door, adult child walks in the house, never mentions that they were gone. They were full no contact for over, 3 years, and they just suddenly showed up. Those parents had to accept that they wouldn't know, accept that they weren't going to ask, and let time run its course. And over time, you are likely to get answers. But they come indirectly, and asking for them is not going to get you there any faster. Okay, so let's go through these 5 explanations that we hear from adult children in the research about why they leave. So this is from the adult children when we survey them nationally in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, primarily in those areas. The oceanic countries also are doing some research. So regardless of where you live, do a little Googling and see what kind of research you can find. This is predominantly a list of 5 reasons why adult children tell us they leave. One is that they are emotionally overwhelmed. They may not have the language or the communication skills, the relationship skills, the confidence in you or your relationship to be able to say, hey, I gotta go. They fear that any explanation will lead to an emotional tug-of-war, an argument, some kind of kerfluffle. And they don't have the energy for it. They don't have the time for it. They're done. They're done trying. So, interestingly, it's often because they are already feeling emotionally overwhelmed. Number 2, past attempts to explain themselves have failed. That's not surprising. For parents, what I hear is that they're just going along as they normally do. Same communication, same strategies, same interpersonal skills, behaviors, and all of a sudden they blow up. They're wrong, they're bad, they're causing trauma, they're dishonest, there's a whole list of things. In the process of transitioning from recognizing how they're feeling about the communication between adult child and parent, they begin to recognize that it's not working for them. They no longer want that communication to be the natural way that they communicate with their parent. And in trying to tell us, show us, demonstrate, hint, sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's covert, and we miss it because we're going too fast. Number 3 is self-protection. They say that they want to regulate their emotions or protect their mental health, and distance, physical and verbal distance, is what they decide they need. They just need a break. They need a timeout. They need to step away. And remember, silence does not mean rejection. It doesn't. So often, when adult children reconnect and they hear their parents' thoughts on what reasons existed for them leaving, and they correct or share their perspective on why they left, and really they're their reasons, so they get to say why they left, it's surprising. It's surprising. Often it has nothing to do with us, except that they didn't trust that we could be close to them while they were sorting out whatever the issue was and mind our own business. So they create this distance. The fourth reason is difference in perspectives on obligation. They don't feel like they're obligated to tell us. They're adults now. They're independent. They have their own lives, in many cases their own nuclear family, and they don't feel obligated to tell us. They don't feel like they need to justify their choices, and certainly not to their parents. For them, no contact feels like a right, a privilege, not a betrayal. The fifth reason is unresolved shame or guilt. They may feel ashamed of needing that distance, maybe guilty for hurting their parents. They know that we are left in the dark and that it hurts us. It's not necessarily that they want to inflict pain or punish us, although it feels like it, absolutely feels like it. How dare they? Don't they know everything I've done for them? I've taken care of them all their life, and suddenly they're just going to cut off communication? What if I need them in my old age? Will they come back? The silence, it is not always about punishment. I can't say this often enough. The silence feels punishing. It feels like lashing out, like intentionally inflicting pain. And when we talk to the adult children, it just isn't that. Now, in some cases, yes, of course. There's nothing pure about estrangement. Predominantly, we hear from adult children that it was about self-preservation or fear. Fear of not being able to deal with life without us inserting ourselves. Again, me explaining this to you and sharing this research probably is not eliminating your pain. It's probably not giving you closure. So let's keep listening. This is what I mean by understanding and knowledge does not erase the pain. Okay, the third segment that we're going to talk about is the emotional cost of not knowing, the toll it takes on us. I mean, people go gray. They become depressed. They lose jobs. Marriages dissolve. Estrangement is brutal. If you're walking through some degree of estrangement, you know what I'm talking about. I hear from parents that sometimes going no contact is actually some relief. They feel guilty for saying that out loud, and there's some truth to it. I remember those days. I needed space as well to put my pieces back together and figure out who I was without that relationship at the center of my world. I believe that had my daughter not stepped away and gone no contact for almost 3 years, she and I would be in a rocky relationship still. We would not have found our way to a trust-based, mutually respectful relationship. And we still trip over it. But predominantly, we have found our way back and reestablished a new relationship. Parents may feel, you may be feeling this right now as you're listening, disbelief. Now, that's part of the grief cycle, the first stage, the disbelief. This can't be my child. It must be someone else. They must have had a mental breakdown. Someone else might be influencing them. All of that might be true. It is unusual that there isn't some element of the adult child making the decision, whether it's under or with the influence of someone else or on their own, independent of anyone else. The adult child is acting in a way that is so different and incongruent with who our parents know them to be that there's just plain old bold disbelief. Blame, self-blame. What did I do wrong? Why are they doing this? I blame them. If only they would listen. If only they would come back. If only they would read my letter. If only, if only. And then there's the rumination, replaying events, replaying conversations. When we begin to recognize some of the places that we know we misstepped, we needed to have handled things differently, we become more intense in our desire to get them to listen to us so we can just explain. That is counterproductive to what our adult children say will bring them back. They don't want us to ask questions. They don't want an explanation. They want us to listen. They want us to understand them. And it's not unusual that once we begin listening and really listening to understand, then we can begin to get more information. Little by little, we may come to understand what happened for the adult child. I can almost guarantee you, I don't know everything, I make mistakes every day, all day long. I feel really certain in saying, stopping, listening, reflecting, and standing by in support is the basis of building trust that will support a new mutually respectful relationship. The chronic uncertainty that we experience in estrangement really can lead to exhaustion, anxiety. Our sleeping patterns are disrupted. If you are experiencing these things, anxiety, depression, I want you to consider seeing a mental health provider, licensed, professional mental health provider, because these collateral outcomes of estrangement can benefit from mental health support. There are medications that can help. There are strategies, techniques, there are groups. By itself, estrangement is not, in my opinion, a mental health issue. The outcomes of estrangement can lead to mental health concerns. What's going on before the estrangement can lead to mental health concerns for our adult children and for us. We maybe don't even know why we're depressed before they leave. And then we have to face it. We have to dig into it. It was not good to begin with. So again, estrangement all to its own is not a mental health issue. So unless you are experiencing the residual mental health outcomes, I would recommend that you find a coach. Again, there's some great episodes out there about coaching and the differences between the two. The really important truth in this section is that you can acknowledge your longing for answers, your desire for answers, your desperation for answers, and still move forward without that resolution. This is, again, where you reach the acceptance, transformation, and maintenance stages of the estrangement cycle of grief. The process is not linear. It's very circular. It's cyclical. And so we each walk through these 6 stages individually. But at the end of the day, we need to find ways to move forward. We each get one life. One. There are no redos. So the question there is, how much time do you allocate to the estrangement before you begin to allow yourself the grace, humility, the humble involvement and recognition to move forward? It doesn't mean you're closing the door. It doesn't mean you won't open the door if they come knock on it. I call it leaving the light on. We leave the light on and we get to the business of living. Here are some practical reframes that might be helpful. So instead of saying, I have to know, I can't go on until I know the answers to why this happened. Instead, I want you to try saying, you might want to write this down, I want you to try saying, I may never know. I may never know everything, but I can understand my feelings. I can explore and manage the emotional impact of the estrangement. Another reframe, I can live with unanswered questions and still build peace. I can live with those unanswered questions and still find a new kind of peace internally. The third reframe is, my healing isn't dependent on their explanations. It's dependent on my willingness to grow. We are in control of how we manage the estrangement internally, our emotions, the cyclical thinking, the anger, frustration, the threats, the I'll never speak to them again. It's okay to think it. It's okay to feel it. And then the day may come, if you stay open to it, that you think, well, I maybe need to reconsider. I maybe need to look at this from a different perspective. Doesn't mean you'll change your mind. You may never want to talk to them again. I'm only suggesting that you explore a multitude of perspectives on your circumstances. So if you come to that conclusion, that you understand, for one, it doesn't need to be final, and two, you can change your mind again. If you've not heard of Dr. Josh Coleman, I want you to take a look at some of his work around unresolved grief and accepting ambiguity. Okay, so let's move into segment 5, survival strategies for the unrest of not knowing. We have 5 survival strategies that we're going to look at. The first is, I want you to name the uncertainty out loud. Speak it out loud. Doesn't have to be to anybody else. It could be when you're driving your car alone. It could be a different time during the day when you are alone. I want you to speak the uncertainty out loud. I call this shining the light on. Whatever the circumstance is that you are driven to get certainty to, that you may not ever know. My belief is that what stays in the dark grows in the dark. And by shining a light on it, by speaking it out loud and giving it air, some of the discomfort and unrest dissipates. Just giving it air, saying it out loud. It's like naming the boogeyman under the bed when you're a child. Give it a name, make it personal so that we can bring it into size. Number 2, release the myth of the perfect explanation. How much information would you need to think you had the answer to your questions? What I hear from parents and what I experienced myself is that the explanation at the end of the day didn't matter. The estrangement still happened. And so it might bring clarity. You might get more information, but it most often does not bring relief. Letting go of the belief that knowing would fix the pain is half the battle. Number 3, practice curiosity over closure. So you might replace, why did they do this, with, what can I learn about myself in this waiting time, in this quiet time? How do I maximize this time and put it to work? Curiosity, using curiosity, keeps your mind and your heart open. Certainty closes it. It defines it. It limits it. Number 4, anchor yourself in what you do know. In time, as I work with people and we explore their circumstances and look at things from different perspectives, being curious, we can move to, what can I learn about myself in this waiting? We can leave our hearts open, leave our minds open, and avoid the certainty, the need for certainty that freezes us, that freezes our process. Number 5, create rituals of peace. It sounds a little bit like the 70s, right? Tie-dyed shirts and love beads. We need to create rituals around what does give us peace. Write letters, but don't send them. One of the ways you can protect yourself from hitting the send button is to literally write it out. Write it out. I say write 3 letters. The first is what you want to say. The second is what you think you should say. And the third, what you think they can hear, what they need to hear. So you might light a candle, pray or meditate for both yourself and your child. Pray prayers of grace for both you and your adult child. Whatever they're going through, pray for them. In whatever your faith is, honor them through ritual. If you're a person whose faith is in Mother Nature, in yourself, and not in an organized religion, find ways to honor and meditate for yourself and your child. These rituals, honoring these rituals, help release some of the need for control over the outcome. It gives us space to breathe. It slows down the process and the intensity we feel. It helps us sleep at night. It helps us find healthier rhythms. Maybe practice walking. There are all kinds of things we can do to create rituals of peace of mind, that space to get relief from the intensity of not knowing. Okay, segment 6, this is our last segment. Moving toward inner peace. Not knowing is one of the most difficult emotional spaces to be sitting in. Over time, the silence begins to invite you to self-trust. We can get to know ourselves better. How could we have behaved differently so that when the opportunities present themselves, and most often they do, we can behave and respond differently? It's the human craving for an explanation that drives us into that sense of being paralyzed. When we can step away from that craving, then the healing can begin. And when you stop waiting for the explanations, you can begin to focus and empower yourself to move to a different space. That doesn't mean we don't want answers. We still want the answers. We just come to understand that those answers are not going to satisfy the pain. They're not going to alleviate our feelings. They're not going to move us to a position where we are ready to start building trust that will support a mutually respectful relationship. I want to thank you for joining me today for this episode of the When Our Adult Children Walk Away podcast. Please share this resource with others. To learn more about how I work with people and the services that I provide, my coaching philosophy, and how we work together in coaching, hop over to the When Our Adult Children Walk Away website. That is at whenouraadultchildrenwalkaway.com. You can schedule an appointment directly with me on the website. You can also email me at janet@jesteinkamp.com. Again, I do respond. It may take me a few days, but I do respond to email. Remember, every step toward understanding is a step toward healing. Again, thanks for listening, and remember, you are not alone.